Okay, we're recording Marilyn Harley on May 18th, 2013. She's sitting here in Charleston, South Carolina, and we're all ready to go to a wedding reception in Summerville. My friend Linda Shaw has a wedding reception for her daughter, and we're going to eat dinner with them. So before we go, we're going to have Mom tell some stories. Tell us the story, Mom.
Well, these are stories about Unc. Unc was my grandfather's brother. Unc was an engineer on the Great Northern Railroad, as was my grandfather. And we lived very close to them. We lived around the corner. He went up one block and turned the corner and went down about 3 houses.
Did you tell us where you were living?
This is in Great Falls, Montana. This was I was a little girl, and I was 2 and 3 years old. And I always liked to go over to Unc's house. They didn't have any children, but Unc was always fun to be around. And I liked being there, especially in the springtime when he was planting his garden. And his garden was out in the back. It did not have any little box around it. It was just dug up under. But I remember one time he was planting peas. And as we went along the garden, he had made a little furrow. And as he put each pea in the little trough of the furrow, I would take my foot and stomp it down with my shoe to be sure that it was buried good in that little furrow. And he seemed to think that was kind of fun. And so as we went along, I stamped down each one of those little seeds into the furrow in his garden. And when he got through with his little seeds in his garden here, he went into his garden shed, which was in the back behind the garden, just before you got to the alley. And he would get out his little wooden little people, they weren't leprechauns, they were little elves, I guess. And he would get out his little wooden people, and he would take them over here to his rock garden, and he would stick them in the rock garden, and it was so cute. I'm sure he made those little elves himself. And
It might have been those gnomes.
yeah, whatever they were cute little characters, and he had a little point on them so that he could stick them down in the ground. And it looked like they were sitting on rocks in the rock garden. And then he would always have some little flowers that he brought out, and he would plant the little flowers around the rocks and fix up his rock garden. And it was so cute. I just loved it. And it was fun to go over to his house and play there around the rock garden. I was never mischievous with any of his gardening things. I didn't pull them up. But I did have fun playing around the little gardens. And then when it would be time for me to go home, Unc would go back into his garden shed and get the wheelbarrow. And he would sit me in the wheelbarrow and push me home in the wheelbarrow, which was always a lot of fun. Children like wheelbarrow rides. And so it was always fun to be with Unc in the springtime when he was doing his garden. And back in the back, we had an alley that went behind the garage and the garden tool shed. And the alley is where the garbage man would drive down the alley and pick up the garbage cans and emptied it into the back of the garbage truck. I remember one of the garbage men was a member of the church. He was a big husky guy. I guess you had to be to pick up all the garbage every week. But and also down this alley would come Raspberry. Now, Raspberry was the name of an Indian man. You see, up on the hillside behind the Great Falls, there was an Indian village, a Navajo Indian village. And it was on the backside of what we called Hill 57. 57 is the number that was used by what was it? You know, that company has 57 sauce and Worcestershire sauce and all those different kinds of sauces. They came and put 57s on hillsides. I'm told, but I never saw one other than the one on Hill 57 behind Great Falls. And the Indian children lived up there. They brought them down in a bus to go to our school. And so Raspberry was one of the men that had long braided hair. That's what all the men had in those days. And he would come down the alleys looking in the garbage cans for usable clothes or shoes or whatever that people were discarding. And in those days, we didn't have a lot of plastics and things. So, you know, there was a good bit of supply of good stuff in there, I guess. Anyway, my dad used to tease me and tell me one day Raspberry was coming down the alley and he heard this little baby crying. And so he looked in Raspberry's wagon and sure enough, there I was. So he picked me out of the wagon and took me home. And that's how I came to be with my mom and dad. But I knew he was teasing because he would laugh the whole time he was telling me the story. Yeah, he did. But that was his little tricky story he liked to tell me. Okay, now let me tell you about the front yard. The front yard didn't have very much in it except it had a big tree over in the corner. And it gave a lot of shade in the summertime. And under the tree grew dandelions. And the dandelions were fun to play with. I would go get a little pan of water and bring it out and sit it in the grass by the dandelions that my friend Carol and I picked. And we would split the stems apart. From the bottom of the stem, we would pull it apart and put it in the pan of water. And it would curl the stem up. And if you put it in tore lots of little strips, you had lots of little curls on your dandelion. And then we would also put the dandelion underneath our chin. And if the dandelion reflected yellow on the underside of our chin, that meant we liked butter. And so we would sit and play with the dandelions and split with it. And it was just a little fun thing that we used to do under the big tree in the front yard. Now, the street went in front of the house and down the side of the house. And, but we stayed in the yard. We never went out and played in the street. I guess our uncle an auntie must have told us it was a little dangerous. But we never strayed away from the house. Now, inside the house, I've seen pictures of this house where there were no screens around the front and the sides of the porch. But I don't remember that. I just remember having screens across the front and on the sides of the big porch, and big rocking chairs out there. And so that was kind of a fun place to sit and rock. But we would go in through the front door and into the foyer there, where there was a very nice coat stand where Auntie and Grandma, my grandma and my mom, and my dad and Uncle would all hang their top coats on this nice little stand here, or to say preserve them while they were in the house. And there was also a nice round umbrella stand that we would put the umbrellas in. But the funny little story about this little room here is that after they were ready to go somewhere, they would come out of the living room and they would go out and get their coats. And Auntie and whoever else was with her, like say my grandmother, and they were sisters, Auntie and my grandmother would help each other put their fur coats on. But Unc and maybe my grandfather would have to struggle. Anyway, it was kind of a strange deal that the men didn't help the women with their coats. And they used to laugh about that. And over on the side of this foyer was a stairway that went downstairs, and also it went upstairs. And I used to go over and open up the door, and I was probably 2 years old. And Unc's name was Arthur. And I used to mimic my aunt, because she used to go over there, open the door, and say, "What are you doing, Arthur?" And so I would go over and open the door, and I would say, "Doing, Arthur, doing, Arthur," when I was just a little 2-year-old. I used to like to spend the night over there, and behind the kitchen there was this little small bedroom that I would sleep in. That was just big enough for a little bed and a little trunk that they would sit on the end and open up, and it would have drawers on one side, and it would have a rod on the other side for me to hang clothes. And so I used to like to go over there and spend the night. And back in the corner was her pantry. And the pantry always had good things in it, like cookies and bananas and things like that. So it was fun to go over there and spend the night and then get up. And you know what Auntie had? Auntie had a toaster. We didn't have a toaster. That was something that was kind of expensive, I guess. I don't know. But she had a toaster, and she would make toast in the morning. And that was fun to go over there and have some toast in the morning. So that was Auntie. Auntie was my grandmother, Ballard's, my dad's mother's sister, and Unc was my dad's father's brother. So sisters married brothers. And it was, their names were Arthur Ballard and Carrie Panther was Auntie's name. And my grandparents' names, his name was Clifton Ballard, and my grandmother's name was Hannah Hanson. And they were sisters. My grandmother was a school teacher. She had graduated from the school in in Waseca and went over to Mankato to get further education and become a school teacher. Auntie was talented in music. She played the piano lovely. She had a lovely voice. She sang very pretty. And so she had a nice piano at her house. And that we enjoyed that. And my mother enjoyed that too, because my mother was musical and she played the piano. So it was a very nice resource for our family for her to have this piano in her living room. And I heard Auntie sing several times. It was just nice. I remember when I was little, about 3 years old, Unc died. And that was a sad time for me because I used to really enjoy being with Unc. But I was really too little to get the full impact of what that meant in my life at that time. But then, when I was in the second grade, Auntie died while I was in school one day. And I remember that Carol's mother, Nedra Evans, no, her name was Nedra. But she came to school and got me out of school and took me home. And she told me on the way home what had happened. And that was a sad day. But they spent about almost a year cleaning out her house and looking for her will, because they knew she had a will. And then, so we left the house around the corner and moved over into Auntie and Unc's house. And we were there almost a year. And then my father decided to take a railroad position in Lewistown. So we moved over to Lewistown. This was just before Cheryl was born, in the summer of 1945. Cheryl was born August 9th, 1945. And it was a good place to live. I liked living in Lewistown. But Auntie and Unc had, in their will, they had purchased, unbeknownst to me, they had purchased a savings bond, a $700 savings bond for me. And my mother just kept that savings bond for me, and it matured the summer before I went to college for $1,000. And that $1,000 was what put me through Brigham Young University for my freshman year. It paid my tuition. It paid my rent. I had enough money to buy food. And it bought me a new coat for the winter and new boots. And that was a great blessing in my life, to have the money to go to school, to college. None of my family had gone to college before. But I was able to go and didn't have to worry about my freshman year. And it was really a good thing for me. I remember in this house, there was a chair over in the corner of the kitty corner from the piano. There was a chair. And my mother used to sit me on the floor in front of her in that chair and braid my hair every other day. Her braids were so beautiful and so tight that I only had to braid it every other day into French braids. And she had pretty little ribbons that she tied on the ends of my braids. So if you see my hair in braids in pictures, you'll know that my mother had done that for me before I went to school. Or if it was Sunday coming up, she put rags in my hair. And she would pull those out in the morning to have curls, long curls. So it was a good time, part of my life when I was a little girl. And my friend Carol lived just down the street, about a half a block. And we used to play together after school, play together during the summertime. And we had lots of fun together, played dolls. Mostly Carol's house had lilac bushes all along her front fence. And her parents let the bushes grow so they were really bushy at the bottom as well as the top. But we could crawl around in between them and we could kind of hide in these lilac bushes. And it was a lot of fun to play in the lilac bushes. And her yard was fenced in also. And we played dolls a lot over there in her yard. And her mother had a nice swing on the clothesline, on the end, the big support at the end of the clothesline. And we would swing sometimes. So we had a lot of fun playing together. I don't know whatever happened to Carol. We moved to Lewistown, and when I came back, she wasn't in my school anymore. So I'm not quite sure what happened to Carol. But I hope to see her again someday. Are we finished?
Thank you, Mom. That was a good story.